encouraging to have you here. Please turn your Bibles with me over to John chapter 11. We're going to talk about Lazarus part 2. Last week we got a chance to talk about the fact that this story is only in the book of John and why it possibly didn't make it into Matthew, Mark, and Luke. And if you don't remember that, then, well, you have to go to YouTube and watch it all over again. Yeah, it's up there. This week, we're going to see how Jesus interacted with Martha, because before he decided that he was going to wait. He heard about Lazarus being sick, and he knew he was going to die. But he also knew what he was going to do. He said it's not going to result in death. And he waited purposely before he came. And before he even gets to town, it says that Martha hears about him. And then, let's see here. Let's start reading in verse 17. On his arrival, Jesus found that Lazarus had already been in a tomb for 4 days. Bethany was less than 2 miles from Jerusalem. I told you that last week. Kind of give you a preview. Okay. And many Jews had come to Martha and Mary to comfort them at the loss of their brother. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, he went out to meet him, but Mary stayed at home. All right. We had people that came from Jerusalem to comfort the sisters. The sisters who now, as far as we know, are very eligible females. It's a wealthy family. Okay? And now Lazarus is gone, so whoever marries the sisters is going to be in pretty good standing. Now, we've talked about this before. And this worldview that the Jewish mindset at the time, that if you were rich, you were blessed by God. Matter of fact, we even talked about marriage and divorce coming up. Remember that? And how they were trading up. They would divorce somebody and give back their dowry in order to marry somebody who was richer, to get more of a dowry, and to basically work their way up the social strata. And Jesus, what he had to say about that. Okay? Well, Mary and Martha seem to be very popular people right now. Martha sneaks out. She sneaks out because she hears Jesus is out there. Verse 21 says, Lord, Martha said to Jesus, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But I know that even now God will give you whatever you ask. And Jesus said to her, your brother will rise again. And Martha answered, I know he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day. All right, remember, we saw these sisters before in the book of Luke. You guys don't remember that? Luke chapter 10. Remember when Martha was real busy preparing things and Mary was sitting at the feet of Jesus, and Martha came in and said, hey, Lord, don't you care that I'm doing all the work? And Jesus said, between the two choices, Mary's made the better choice. And we wondered, did Martha ever listen? Did Martha ever hear what Jesus had to say? Well, it sounds like from this that she was listening. Jesus said, he will rise again. And she says, I know he will rise again on the resurrection of the last day. Jesus had gotten through to her about that. There's going to be a time, a resurrection on the last day. There's going to be a resurrection. And Jesus says something very startling here. Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. Now, Jesus has said, I am the light before. I am the good shepherd. I am the gate for the sheep. We have a lot of I am passages, but this is one of the most amazing I am passages we have. I am the resurrection. This resurrection you're waiting for. I am the power that triumphs over death. I am that power. And we believe that, don't we? We believe that. We believe that Jesus is the power over death. And that he is the life. He says, I am the resurrection and I am the life. He said, he who believes in me will live even though he dies. Whoever lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this? Yes, Lord, she said, I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God, who has come into the world. Martha has made the good confession, hasn't she? This is the confession that we ask everybody who wants to fellowship with us as family to make. I believe Jesus is Lord. I believe Jesus is the Messiah, the Christ. You know what's interesting in the book of John? We don't have Peter's confession. Do you remember how in the other three Gospels that was kind of the highlight of the Gospel? Right? When Peter said, I believe you are the Christ. John doesn't even mention that. Instead we have Martha making this confession. I believe you're the Messiah. It says here, after she said this, she went back and called her sister Mary aside. The teacher is here, she said, and he is asking for you. Now, we don't know have the text that he asked for, but obviously I don't know if Martha's lying about that. So he's asking for you. When Mary heard this, she got up quickly and went to him. Now, Jesus had not yet entered the village, but he was still at the place where Martha had met him. When the Jews who had been with Mary in the house, comforting her, noticed how quickly she got up and went out, they followed her, supposing she was going to the tomb to mourn there. All right. The Jewish mourning ritual was extensive. It was extensive. It took in everybody in the community that knew the person who had died. And the first 4 days were incredibly intense mourning. And there was no debating, there was no talking, there was no idle. It was all about mourning. Jesus missed those 4 days, didn't he? He's been in the tomb for 4 days. But after that, there's a whole week of mourning that it's common to go to the tomb, the place of burial, and people would go there with them to comfort them, right? Now, these are people that came in from Jerusalem. Matter of fact, John uses the term the Jews, which we kind of find distasteful now, though. I hope we do, right? But he used it in a very technical way. These are the people that didn't believe in Jesus. These are the people that his original hearers needed to have a different perspective on because they wanted to be like these Jewish religious leaders. We've seen that over and over again in the book of John. And we're going to see it again in this story. Next week. Okay? This week, we're going to look at what happens with the Mary and Martha thing. They rush out, follow Mary. They suppose she's going to the tomb. What she's after is going to see Jesus. They're surprised she doesn't go to the tomb. Jesus, obviously wanting to have some time with Mary, has stayed where he was when he was talking to Martha. It says here, when Mary reached the place where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet and said, Lord, if you'd been here, my brother would not have died. We just heard that, right, from Martha. Exact same words. If you would have showed up earlier, you could have taken care of this. Lazarus would be alive. He says, when Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who had come along with her also weeping, he was deeply moved and troubled. That's an interesting word, troubled. It's used 4 other times in the New Testament. And those other times are translated angry. He was angry. Was he angry because these people weren't really mourning? They weren't willing, maybe they were not. Was he angry because he really hadn't been? We don't know, but he was troubled. He was deeply moved and troubled. He said, where have you laid him? He asked. Come and see, Lord, they replied. Jesus wept. Then the Jews said, see how he loved him. But some of them said, could not he who opened the eyes of a blind man have kept this man from dying?